Well, welcome. My name is Liz. I'm from Adobe, and I'm going to introduce our host today. I'm going to lead off with our panelist for the second half of our session today. We have here Erica Leroux. She is the Senior Product Manager at Zalando in Berlin. And we also have Talon Wadsworth. He is the principal designer at Adobe, located in San Francisco. And Temi Coker. He is the multiple disciplinary artist and a past Adobe Creative resident living in Dallas. And we also have with us for our main presenter, Julia Masalska.
I know it's really hard. It's really challenging last name, but you did
Right
great.
now, I got it. Freelance designer and educator for Adobe, an award-winning multidisciplinary designer. So I wanted to ask you all to, again, if you haven't already, if you're just coming in, take our poll. It looks like most of you think along with Talon, that coming soon is our portfolio. Oh my goodness. But yes, a lot of you have a portfolio, so that's good. You're going to learn a lot today. And if you haven't yet, hopefully today will inspire you. And then your Adobe XD experience. Well, we've got a lot of beginners here. That's awesome. We're really excited to have you. We hope you get inspired as well. And it looks like right now, the leading choice for if you could have a superpower, what would it be, is time travel so far. I think we're all in that same boat.
I think is that a result of the last year or so? It's got to be, right?
Right? Like, take me out of here. Talon, what would be your superpower?
I got to go with flying. This is a classic. I mean, you just can't, but like, what a different experience, like what a different reality to be able to just take off from the ground. So
yeah, definitely. Erica, what's your superpower if you could have one?
That's a good one. I think would be something along the lines of reading people's mind. So just to predict some things, yeah, that could be helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially when working with clients.
But could you read their minds virtually like that? So
that would be even more powerful, really.
Yeah, I gotta say, yeah.
Yeah, I just want a little bit of intuition, just a little bit. And then Temi, what do you want? What is your superpower?
With what Talon said, I think flying would be mine. I'm an introvert at heart, so if I just need to get away from people, I can just chill in the clouds.
There you go.
Yeah. That surprises me you're an introvert, because you're always pretty awesome on these sessions. People love hanging out with you.
Thanks. Yeah, I love teaching and talking to people, but I think I also have a threshold. So after you guys come in, a good time.
Well, I'm glad. Well, Julia, you tell us your superpower and you kick it off. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Liz.
Awesome. Yeah, I think my superpower would be flying as well, because I actually had, as a child, I had lots of those dreams where I was just like using my hands as wings. Or I also had those crazy dreams where I could jump like really, really tall, really high. So that was fun, and I would love to experiment with that. But also, I think time travel is so cool. I would definitely go like back to the 80s New York art scene. That would be the thing for me. Meet Jean-Michel Basquiat in person. That would be really, really great. Well, yeah, great question. So if you haven't answered, feel free to do so. So should we jump right into it?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So we are talking all things portfolio today, and I would like to share some of the portfolio tips that I kind of gathered over time through experience, and I would like to share that experience with you. And so first of all, I'll welcome everybody. Let us know in the chat where you all are tuning in from. Let's kind of have a conversation. Also feel free to shoot some questions for our panelists, and you can also have conversations in the chat within yourself. Maybe you find someone who you already know, say hi. All right, so my friends, let's jump right into this. And so my first portfolio tip for you would be, when you're working on your personal portfolio, is to try passion projects. I remember when I started out working as a freelance designer, it was really hard for me to get clients. And that was because I didn't have a lot of experience, and also I didn't have a lot of tangible projects in my portfolio that I would like to work on in the future. So let's say you have a specific industry in mind that you want to work for in the future. Maybe you want to work for the food industry, maybe for the fashion industry. Try to create passion projects where you can show those skills in combination with that specific industry. That can help you really attract those specific clients, because whenever somebody looks at your portfolio, they're looking for things that kind of resonate with them, right? So if they see you have an experience in a specific industry already, or you are passionate about the specific industry, they're more likely to hire you, right? So make sure to try passion projects where you pick a topic, where you create what you're passionate about, and where you're kind of showing your design skill set, show what you can do, how experimental you can be. And also, a passion project can be something where you solve a problem in your environment. That's usually also a very good way to start to create the initial projects that you can then present to either a full-time hire, or maybe you want to work as a freelance designer. So problem solving is what we do as designers, right? So if you are able to show that skill in your portfolio, it's going to be definitely of a big benefit for you. And then another thing is just thinking about problem solving and how you can be a designer. It shows in your portfolio, right? So you don't want to just do something out of the pure aesthetics of things. So you don't want to design something of the pure aesthetics. You want to be a designer who is interested in specific topics, who has specific values, right? And if you are interested in a specific topic, just be that designer, solve that problem with design, right? So that's one of the tips. Then another thing that I found really, really important when, especially when presenting my work to clients, is staying true to yourself. So your work should represent some of your personality. It should show some of your passion, because whenever you're presenting work and you're really truly passionate about something, when you're truly deeply know that this is something that kind of reflects on you, or it's a skill that you want to, that kind of resonates with yourself a lot, the person will notice it. You will suddenly have this very, very passionate way of talking about this specific project, right? And then another thing that we were talking about yesterday is apply your personal brand identity. So define yourself as a designer and create yourself a brand identity. So create yourself a logo, find yourself a typography that you reuse over and over, that's part of your identity. For example, on social media. So that's also something that you can bring into your portfolio, and you can define all of that and really kind of bring the value of yourself as a designer with your projects. And then you should be able to express yourself in your projects, right? Whenever you design something, just be passionate about and express what you think, express the solution that you see for a specific problem. All right, next one up is create case studies. So sometimes you see portfolios that are created purely in a visual way, right? So you see an image, it looks very beautiful, but it doesn't say anything in depth about the exact project. It doesn't say anything about the target audience. So how is somebody supposed to see if you did a good job designing or not, if they don't know what audience you designed for, and also doesn't know the process of your thinking, right? So that's something that people who want to work with you are looking at first. It's your thinking. Are you able to solve problems? Are you able to think like a designer? And are you able to keep the target audience in mind and really solve a problem with your design and not just create something beautiful? Right. So that's why I always recommend to document the process of you designing something, right? Create yourself some images of maybe you sketching out something, keep that all documented, maybe even record your screen and keep that process for yourself, and maybe it can be something that you can use in your portfolio to show that progress of your thinking, of your decision making, and how you get from point A to point B, right? So as designers, as I was saying earlier, we are problem solvers. So in the case study, which is basically a flow of different steps that you took to get to the solution, right? You present a specific problem and then you present the solution to that specific problem, right? So that's something that you want to show. And another thing that I've also learned in school, I went to industrial design school, by the way, so I did not learn graphic design or branding or packaging or anything that I'm doing these days at school, but I've learned some very, very important key factors of a good case study or a good presentation where you are kind of able to solve a problem or show the solution to a specific problem with design. And our teachers would always say, start with the shocking facts. So maybe you are presenting a specific problem that has data behind it, that has numbers behind it, maybe has some research studies behind it. Present the audience with the shocking facts so that your project automatically gains value. You are solving a problem, right? Let's say there's maybe some scientific background to something that you're solving. Show that data and present the viewer of the case study with some facts, with some interesting information that's backing up your design decisions. All right, then another thing that I found super interesting and super inspiring is working with other designers. So I, for example, I'm not an illustrator, right? But I do branding. And sometimes part of a branding, a brand identity is illustration. So why not collaborate with other designers on a passion project to create a larger, a more amazing project, kind of combining all of your skills. So let's say, for example, you're UI, UX designer, but you have a friend who is an illustrator. Why not work together and create something amazing, right? And why not help each other kind of put together these portfolio pieces? Sometimes collaborations like that can really show that you're able to be part of a team and work with others, especially when it's self-initiated. So especially when you made the decision to put together kind of resources with other people and kind of enhance your skills with other people's skills. And that's also a very beautiful kind of part of collaboration and creating something for a common portfolio piece. And maybe you're even able to build a team. Maybe you're even able to work with a developer, somebody who can code that site or that experience that you've produced, right? Maybe there is a way to really make it happen and to really publish it online, and instead of it being just like a concept project, right? Just make it real. Okay, then another thing that I've noticed, especially when I see designers who are just getting into the design world, is that we all are kind of having very similar resources at the beginning. We're trying to get all the free mockups that we can get from online. So my tip for you is maybe to try create your own mockups, so your portfolio pieces will stand out from the other designers that you see. Sometimes you look at people's portfolios and they kind of look very similar just because people are using all the same mockups over and over. But why not take your own photos? Why not get creative, even with presenting your work? And a tool that I really find helpful for that is Photoshop. So sometimes when I, for example, want to create a little like a mock-up like that for my packaging, because I am a packaging designer. Of course, you can do the same for any of your experiences that you design. But taking beautiful photos of it and then creating a mock-up where you kind of filling the surfaces with your design. So it can be, for example, a mobile phone that somebody's holding in their hand, maybe like a laptop that's open, and you create this beautiful situation that works with a brand that you're designing for. And everything kind of will match that exact experience that you want to create, right? So try creating your own mockups is something that I want to recommend you. Then, whenever you're creating a user experience, right? And some of you are UI UX designers, make it functional. So user experience that's not, that somebody cannot experience, it's really hard to comprehend, right? So if you have motion in your site, show that motion in your portfolio, create a GIF or maybe like an MP4 file that you add to your portfolio, show that motion. Then create a prototype. So create a functional prototype, and with Adobe XD, you're able to share a link where somebody can access your UI UX prototype and can actually go through it, go through the user flow. So you can build something that a person can experience that you cannot describe in single screens maybe, right? Show the user journey. How does the person go from point A to point B? And another thing that I found really, really helpful, especially when you're working on passion projects, is do not use lorem ipsum. Because sometimes you see a product, you see a portfolio piece, and it seems so real. It seems like it's already there in the world, right? It seems like it's already existing. People are using it. You see images of a person actually using that product. And then there is lorem ipsum in it. That kind of breaks the whole illusion of the product being real, right? So I also do that, for example, when I design packaging. I never, ever use lorem ipsum because that makes it a little bit less tangible, a little bit less real, right? A little bit less alive. So that's another tip that I've learned. Do not use lorem ipsum. Just use any kind of sample copy that might go there. All right, I'm talking a lot. I'm really passionate about portfolios. I've probably created about 30 of them in my lifetime. So I'm sure you also are always kind of adjusting your portfolio. But the most important thing is to start somewhere, and to really start small, and then to adjust your portfolio over time, right? Because if you are kind of comparing yourself to others and you see all of these amazing portfolio pieces online, it can get really intimidating, right? I mean, if you're comparing yourself to someone who is already 10 to 20 years in the industry and they have all of these amazing partners, they work with Nike and with I don't know, all the big brands. And you are there with your passion project and you're like, oh, I wish I had something bigger that I can show. But don't compare yourself to others, and start somewhere, and start small, start building out your portfolio, start building out your personal brand, and go from there. Adjust it, make it better over time, right? So that will be a little bit less intimidating, and it will help you to kind of get started, get going, and to have something that you can present, because something is always better than nothing, right? So, all right, super excited to take a look at some of the portfolios that we have for you today. And by the way, this presentation is made in Adobe XD, which is super fun. This is what that looks like. And those transition, all of that stuff, you can also do that all here in Adobe XD. And by the way, this is my personal brand, and you can see there are a lot of graphics that are going on, and it's it was super fun to create this. So try out XD. All right, so we have two amazing designers that we want to take a look at today. And we're going to start off with Jenny Leons, and let's connect with all the other panelists so we can kind of get some feedback going.
Julia, I just wanted to quickly mention, I don't see Jenny in the list yet, but we do have Antonio.
All right, so let's start with Antonio.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we have three amazing experienced designers that are going to give us some feedback, and I'm also going to try to throw my couple cents into it. So let's start with Antonio. So maybe we can start with like a first glance kind of inputs. What do you guys see? What do you guys think? What are your first impressions of Antonio's portfolio? Maybe Tallinn, we can start with you.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it. Well, I mean, overall, coming in, I really like the reel. I like that it's sort of giving an overview of all the projects, even giving a little process, overview there as well. I think it's a little fiddly, but overall, I like the glimpse that it's giving us, like into the projects and into some of the sort of process behind creating that. So overall, I think it's getting a nice vibe. I like the personal mark. Like Antonio, your personal mark is really, really elegant. It's very understated. I don't think it's, it's really in your face, but I think it's got some nice details sort of to it. I think it also connects to the typeface, the headline typeface you're using, which I think is nice to sort of have that consistency going on. I think if there's one thing I'm missing right here, I think is like at least some navigation to the project, or even like a jump link. I wasn't entirely sure like what was below the fold, as it were, here. Not that it's like the biggest thing, but I would say like that's probably what I'm missing, is just like, a quick jump to the work, up there with about, contact, like if it had something right there that just said like work, and I could just jump right to it, whether or not I scrolled down or not, just to give me that nice index of the work. Because even if it was a jump link, I'd appreciate that. But overall, nice vibes coming in. The work looks nice. Of course, typography. I'm a big type nerd, probably like everyone here. So I love seeing that stuff. So.
All right, cool. Maybe we can take a look at some of the images and get some first impressions from Timmy.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely love your logo mark. I love how at the top it talks about you, like what you do and things like that. I do think having a work at the top would be beneficial, and you could still kind of keep this real for the front page, but I think having the reel of like all of the different types of work you've done, or the behind the scenes, like what you had for the Maximus thing. I think having that on the front page is really good, because it draws people in. I think it makes people wonder, like, okay, if he can do this, what else has he done? And then we can go to work. And I think if you scroll down with the way you kind of put the pictures together, I think this template is it's more beneficial for like photography. So I would think of like having the page where, you have the title of the work and people can click on it or hover their mouse over it and they see a glimpse of the work. Kind of like what you have here, but imagine if all of the letters were just on top of each other, like you have the Maximus, Labrador Hotel, blah, 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 and you click on each of them. Yeah, and I think I love the color behind once you hover over. I think that's very neat and very simplistic. But yeah, I think you're off to a great start. I just think, composition wise and thinking about the end user, right? Like I'm a fan of going to someone's website and I see like a bunch of the work that they've done almost like mashed up into a slide or a video or whatever, because then it makes people curious and then they go into the work. So
yeah, awesome. Thank you. Erica, you are a product designer, so give us your first impressions of the landing page. What do you think is well solved? What do you think is missing?
Sure. So I agree on everything that already has been said. I really like the fact that you have a specialization, Antonio, at the beginning, clarifying that you really like packaging and graphic design. So already gives a glance of, okay, what kind of spectrum on design do you focus on? Maybe we can give a look to one of the projects, just because, again, I am less of a visual person. We're more like a content designer at the end. So we can take actually the Lavender one, because it was one that was touching offline and online touch points. So that was an interesting one to comment on. Yes, okay, perfect. So again, tip, as we were saying, so let's try to empathize with the end user. So if I'm a hiring manager or a senior manager, okay, like how can I understand what was your process that you went through? And on this project, I could see that you designed this new identity like holistically. So with offline touch points, but also with online experiences. There is a small prototype at the end that actually shows how this identity looks like on online too, which is great. But at the same time, again, I would have a little bit of a hard time to understand if you designed with intention. So are you doing like a visual exercise, or you're actually addressing some users' needs that you took in consideration? Or, for example, there were any technical limitations that you have to consider, any client's request or anything like that that is worth mentioning, let's say. So I see that at the beginning, you also have these sort of mind maps that are part of your design process. So I would suggest maybe to isolate some of your steps in the design process and just give more value to that. Just explain how do you work and how do you approach different kind of challenges. And also, again, what was the challenge in itself? This is also something that you can clarify a little bit better at the beginning of the page. So it's not only the concept, but it's also what kind of problem are you trying to address here?
Yeah, I think getting down to the pages here, we got a quick glimpse at this, but I think overall looks like you're kind of following kind of the same template, for each of the projects, but which I think is nice. It's nice to sort of have that consistency of layout. Even like the little collection of sort of in progress sketches, sort of collected and sort of nicely presented. I really, that's a nice element. I feel like I just glimpsed that on the Maximus one as well. I think, Antonio here, what you probably want to do is be very intentional about the storytelling here, and your sort of emphasis. Like if I'm sending this to someone and I'm looking to get hired as a brand designer, of course, all the brand work would be definitely front and center. And then of course the interactive work, if you were going to, sort of tweak this to go for maybe a more interactive focused job, you'd want to, just kind of reorder these things, really be thinking about, okay, what's the main message I want to send here? And I think overall, I'm getting a sense of, in your calling out in your sort of sentence, your headline, right? Really focus on brand, focus on packaging. And I think in that case, I also like seeing on the Lavendel piece, the sort of application in an interactive project. I think that's one of the sort of, I think you're covering the application of brand in a very broad way, which I think is really nice. The product shots, I think overall are very nice as well. I think what we want to see more, again, I think it's hard to say if you go back up to the top here, Julia, just making sure that you're representing, so this is a project for school. I see. So you're doing that. I think that's exactly what I was looking for. Was just like really looking for those call outs. I could understand the context of this project, what it was for. Which I'm going to guess you did your own product shots as well for this one. Which I think is that's really nice, and maybe something that you'd want to call out here, and maybe a little more explicitly, that you're also doing the product shots for yourself as well, for your projects as well.
It does very much look like it. And I think really good job here, Antonio, on creating like your own unique mock-up here. It really looks very realistic, just because it's not too polished and perfect. I think it gives it a very realistic vibe.
Yeah, all the shots in my portfolio were actually done by myself at my apartment over the last year.
Nice.
It's really cool.
Interesting being art directed remotely, doing photography in such a small place too.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think one other suggestion that I would love to see more of on your website is passion projects, like what Julia talked about. Because I think, clients, when I always think about the end user, like if I'm hiring someone, I kind of want to see what they like to do for fun. What is that thing that they're passionate about? Because right here, you're doing work for other people or your instructor or school, which is awesome. But I think like if you're able to push yourself, and even in the concept, just talk about, hey, I'm passionate about blah, blah, blah. I wanted to do this or redesign something, I've seen people do like, I saw someone that loved Nike so much, they just made like a fake Nike concept ad of what one of the shoes could look like in the future, stuff like that. And through that, they actually got hired by Nike to be able to help with the campaign, and so I would just say, don't underestimate these passion projects, because they could be that project that gets you that next gig.
Mm-hmm.
But apart from that, everything else looks really good. Yeah.
Similar experience here. So I had someone who was asking me for advice recently, and this guy, he's a freelance illustrator who kind of just started getting into trying to commercialize his skills. And I told him, hey, why don't you just do illustrations of like Airbnb, Brooks, any brands that you, or any kind of skater brands, because he was really into skating. Just do passion projects and include those brands into your illustrations. Why not? And so it seems like he got some jobs out of it, and it's super exciting to see how you can really catch a brand's attention with your work just by creating a concept for them. And why not? And also another thing, it's also creating an illusion as if you have worked for this brand before. So somebody might look at your portfolio and they're like, oh, they've created something for Nike, and it can catch somebody's attention. So it's not necessarily that you should say, hey, I've worked with Nike, or say something that's false. That's not the case. You can say, hey, I've created this concept for Nike, but it's a passion project, but it still would catch their attention.
Yeah.
Maybe the last thing, sorry, that I would like to say, Antonio, about your story, because I mean, you turned from being a chef into a designer, which is a pretty unique, story that you could leverage also at the beginning of your website. Like your main task was to give pleasure to people through food. So it's just a different way to give people something. And I think this is something that makes you really unique. And this is something that you can mention also upfront.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And also it can be another point, a connection point for you into the food industry. What if you kind of start focusing on food clients that are food related? It can definitely give you an advantage because you have so much understanding about food.
Yeah, or if you find a local restaurant or a local store that you love, that you always go to, you can offer to redesign their menu. You're in a very, very interesting and unique space being a chef turned designer, because there's so many possibilities. Hospitality, you could help with restaurant menu building, you could help redesign logos for new companies. Yeah, so keep up the great work, man.
Yeah, this is already looking awesome, I think. I would love to know which projects of these are your passion projects, Antonio, and which ones are any client projects that you had.
They're actually all student projects, but the Wesley Snacks was a project I did outside of school, but then brought into school and started working on it. We had maybe thought about making it a real brand ourselves at some point. Me and my wife worked on it together, but we just don't have the time to logistically make it a real brand right now. But
it looks very real to me.
Yeah, and then
so
also
you did a great job.
Pop-ups, the food truck, was another project that I came up with some icons in an illustration class, and then I turned it into a full branded project.
Yeah, this is awesome. And I also love that you have this cohesion in the way you present those sketches. Every single project has this one slide where you have some initial ideas with this background texture and color that really much is on brand with the project, right? So I think you're doing an amazing job. I think you're on a really, really good path to getting the big clients. What's your plan? What's your, who's your target audience for your portfolio?
Right now I have been interviewing with a few places within the food packaging industry, not necessarily for packaging jobs, but for jobs within their design sector, and hopefully moving into packaging at some point.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, nice work. Julia, maybe you can minimize your browser a little bit so we can see it. Someone asked in the chat to see, of course, the mobile version of the site. Of course, always very important.
Okay.
A portfolio site now is to be able to, it's got to be responsive. I got to be able to look at this, on any size browser that on my device, on my desktop,
Okay,
whatever. So
let's check the responsiveness of this. Gonna slide it in the middle.
probably one thing to keep an eye on, Antonio, is probably just the type size. I don't know how maybe it displays on the browser, but something you might want to check, right? Is in those sections where you do have a lot of type, how is it resizing and scaling, at those smaller sizes to ensure that, it looks good, but looks like, yeah, looks really solid.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's something that was super difficult over the course of designing the portfolio, is making sure it works for all the specific breakpoints. Once it gets to like the tablet size, I had it break down past tablet to be single column, but it gets weird with phones if you have them in like horizontal or portrait view, whichever you have them in, and
Yeah.
very different.
I
Nice
think
work.
overall it's pretty functional.
Yep.
Awesome. One thing that I've noticed is that, let me go back to the original size. So one thing that I think sometimes is missing in portfolios is the call to action. Like that point where you kind of say what you want to achieve with this work, with this presentation of your work, right? So do you want to just get in touch with someone, or do you want to really work with someone, right? Sometimes I feel like it's more clear when you have a very clear intention with your portfolio. So do you want to get hired, or do you just want to work on a project with somebody? Do you want to do a full-time job, or do you want to be a freelancer? So that's maybe something that you should think about, and your contact form maybe can be kind of more intentional. So it's not just connect, because I can connect with you, but I'm not going to offer you any jobs, right? So do you just want to connect with someone, or do you have a specific purpose that you want to connect with? And then we have also social media in here. Let's should we take a quick glance on that? Would that be okay?
Yeah, Instagram is probably more up-to-date projects.
Okay. I think Instagram can be a very powerful tool to attract clients if you are a freelancer. What I kind of tell everybody to not put in is any personal, this does not apply to you, but sometimes I do some portfolio reviews on my YouTube channel also, and sometimes people put their personal accounts, like a Facebook or something that doesn't really relate to your work. So I would definitely, in case there's somebody here who does that, just take those links off. It's not necessary for your future client to see your Facebook. Just keep them relevant, and also keep them in the hierarchy from, I would say, from left to right, like the most important on the left side, because that's probably the one that the person is going to go to. So the social media channel that you kind of find more relevant should be more dominant and more visible. Yeah.
Cool. Actually, and Antonio actually had a question in the Q&A, Julia. Just maybe just sort of toss this out there for everybody.
Sure.
Antonio, do you want to ask it yourself?
Yeah. So
Yeah, Johnny on stage.
I was just curious, as far as your experience working with other designers collaboratively on projects, how do you go about showing the whole project still, but specifying what parts you worked on?
Yeah.
I
Erica
think.
and Tammy, yeah.
Oh, Erica.
No, either way.
Okay.
Go ahead, Tammy, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think having like a credits part on your work is helpful. I don't think you have to go in there and be like, I designed, this part of the project. I think you can show the whole project, shows specific parts of it, and then maybe the part that you worked on, you can expound on it a little bit more by showing behind the scenes of you working on it, or things that you made, concepts that you were thinking of when you were doing that. Because honestly, I think that's the whole point of working as a team, right? You're not there to try to like point your finger at yourself, right? You're there to show the whole project and how you played a part in that. So I think having the credits at the bottom is good, because that's what I did. I had a project last year, and I'm talking like 30 people worked on it, and an agency and an animator. And so what I did on my website is under the credits, I put, even on their website, what they did was they were like, agency did this part, art direction and design, Tammy Coker, and then, animation by blah, blah, blah. And so I think that's a good way to go about with it. And on my website, when I put the project on my website, I did the exact same thing. I never wanted it to be like, oh, it's all about me. It's like, no, this was a whole project. We all put our all into it, and we made it something bigger.
Yeah, if I can add to that, like, I think in general, it's important to understand what were your responsibilities in the project. So, for example, you could collaborate with a UX writer or like another product designer with different, levels of seniority. And it's more like in general to understand what did you take care of, and and just be very transparent with that, because there's no point to oversell yourself. To be honest and just say, okay, I took care of this specific part, or whether it was UI or the brand part. I think it's the best way to go.
Yeah, I think also one thing that I think, especially when you're coming out of school, you're a student, I think there is a little bit of anxiety about sort of maybe claiming more credit than you feel like is necessary, that you can actually. And I think that was an anxiety that I lived with even when I came out sort of into the world. But the reality is, a lot of these projects, it takes a lot of people. It's not just about one person or another. It really is a sort of collective effort. And so I think just don't over rotate towards that anxiety. I think you can feel good about claiming to be part of a great outcome, and not worry too much. As long as you're giving attribution properly, you'll be fine.
Yeah, I love what Erica said about not overselling yourself. That is like, if there's anything you hear from today, it's definitely don't oversell yourself, because I think when you do and then you get the project or whatever, if you don't like hit it on the mark, like it can destroy relationships, it can destroy opportunities for you in the future. So like if you end up doing like a Nike campaign and your part of it was like putting the slides together, like don't say I made the ad campaign and all of that stuff. I think being able to be specific and not overselling yourself will be helpful. And if you feel like you're able to do something better, then that's where passion projects are for, right?
Mm-hmm. And also, having something that says, I worked on this project with this and this amazing designer, or with this and this amazing agency, can give you way more value as a designer, because it shows that you are able to collaborate with others on something bigger, right? So see it as an advantage for yourself to mention that collaboration. Cool. Antonio, do you have any other questions?
No, I think you guys answered that one pretty well. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, hopefully this was helpful for you, Antonio, and we're going to jump into Jenny's portfolio now. Also, Antonio, feel free to reach out with any questions to any of us if you need any help in the future. We're definitely there, and we'll help you however we can.
Thank you.
All right. So, and good luck to you. All right.
Thank you.
So let's jump onto Jenny Leon's portfolio. Jenny is an experienced designer, and we have a little intro section here. We can access the resume, we can access a contact. I would like to hear some first impressions, maybe starting with Timmy. Sorry, you're muted. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So Jenny, I love that when we get on your page, we know exactly who you are, right? And what you do. And we see your work as well. And And I love your thinking, right? I love how you're breaking down like the work that you have done with innovation work and process improvement. Now, I think where I could see improvements would definitely be, your background color. I think gray. I think right now in this world, there are spaces where you can use color, especially with UI UX. I think there's a space, especially for different projects. Maybe the color of the background could match that project. But I think that coming into your website, I think having like a white background color, maybe even black, would be nice. You don't have to have your picture up there. I think you can save that for like the about. And I think even with resume, I don't know, the world that we live in now with design, I don't know if people are like, if that's the first thing they're looking at, because resume is really what you write on paper, but your portfolio shows what you can do and how your brain works. So you can maybe have that in your about page and say, resume upon request. I think it just looks more professional than having it on there. I think that can you scroll down, Julia, just for a second? Yeah, so I see the cake thing and I don't think it should be here because I think you need to figure out like what you're trying to sell, right? Are you trying to sell UI UX? Are you trying to sell cake? And just figure out like, maybe you can make a different website for cake, but I don't think this is the space for it. Because I think if people see this, they're kind of confused, or they're like, she's dabbling between two things. I'm not sure what she's doing. However, I think a link that I could see here is like, okay, how can you turn your love for cakes into a passion project? Maybe show yourself rebranding the cake thing that you do, or making a fake cake company and a fake cake app. Just something that kind of still allows you to still have that cake love in there. I don't think you should let that go. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Awesome. Erica, do you have any ideas
Sure.
for the initial landing page?
Yeah, so in general, I agree. Maybe with a different kind of background, also the content would be a little bit more readable. I found a little bit hard to actually digest some of the content here. In general, I really liked, I can see that you have a lot of knowledge, like theoretical knowledge about design. And I could see that also in your mentorship page, where you express your vision about how you mentor other people. And I could see that you already got a couple of years of experience. So you feel ready to give back a little bit to the team and to the community of design, which is great. So these are all good points for me. In general, again, content needs to be a little bit more snackable. So more concise, a little bit more digestible for somebody that gives a look to this. And for example, on this project here, I learned that you have a couple of years of experience already. And this is maybe something that you can mention in the first page, to say, okay, I'm already working as a UX designer. So yeah, that already gives a glance of your work experience. On this project, I have a couple of things to mention. So again, I'm very happy when I see the double diamond, 3 diamonds process. It's like, okay, perfect. She knows about design thinking, perfect. But I would like to see this more applied in your case study, that if you scroll down, I can see that you kind of created in the text saying, okay, step 1, step 2, but for me, it was a little bit hard to understand exactly what you did and when and why. There is a little bit of lack of focus into the user also. If I see an experienced designer not having any research done, not even mentioning, sometimes you don't have budget, you don't have resources to do research. But it's really important that you mention that. And in case you would have budget, which methodology would you use and why? So that gives you like a more credible work that people can give a look to. But yeah, in general, those are more or less the points. And I like the fact that you mentioned the lesson learned at the end. I could see that you are a lot into processes, ways of working, collaborating with others, which is part of the job, but at the same time, it's also like in terms of the craft, like how can you express the craft here a little bit better?
Yeah, I think, Jenny, what I would say, is maybe taking a step back from the website for a minute and maybe answering some questions about, like, what is the story? What is the overall message that you want to be communicating, to the audience, as a potential audience here? If your work is more sort of heavy on, say, end-to-end process strategy, research, maybe you find a way to highlight that in your story, to really call out and strengthen those elements. And again, I recommend this to kind of everybody who I talk to about portfolios, is really, treat it as if like you're a design project, and if you were going to pitch yourself, to someone, like, what would you want them to know? And what would you want to sort of be strong and be highlighted? And what would you want to sort of be minimized, right? Things that might still be relevant, but again, aren't going to sort of take center stage. And I think right now it feels like we have sort of like a template that's sort of being utilized here, but it's not really put into service of much yet. That really sort of, really highlighting, what is it I'm here to talk about? What's the message I want you to get? And I like that about Antonio's website. He sort of had a message right across the front, right? The big headline, right? Instead of diving right into the depth of like who, like Antonio is, it's really about like, why are you here? I'm here to look at Jenny to evaluate her work as an experience designer. And so if that's the message, then I think right now it's not really coming across very strongly. So your sort of experience, out there kind of in the industry, with experience design. So I think a little bit more about, again, the message you're wanting to send, with the work that you have that's available that you want to showcase. How does that strengthen your case? And really then just like letting those things come to the top and let everything else sort of be, float to the bottom. What are the core, sort of capabilities of an experienced designer that you have the experience, that you have the experience with, that you want to showcase. I think it would really help to sort of have that kind of that message just sort of, writ large right across the front page, and then really, being able to sort of get into the work and highlight the work or the process. I thought that was one thing about Antonio's site that was really nice, which again was highlighting the work, but also a little bit just dipping into that process. And here, I think we have a lot of process and maybe a lot of sort of final designs to share. But I think that's, again, it's something that you can, again, craft your story intentionally, and then highlight those things that are going to reinforce that story. And then I think it'll start to coalesce a little more. And I think you'll start to be able to edit a little more, to make more deliberate choices, to then make sure that people are walking away with the story that you want them to hear. So.
Yeah. And I agree with all the things that have been said. And another thing, one thing that I kind of wanted to highlight is the resume. I also agree with Tammy that it should be upon request. Not everybody kind of wants to share that kind of information that's very kind of personal and very kind of dives deep into your work history. It should be something that somebody can request. And another thing is also, again, what's your call to action? What's the purpose of this portfolio, right? Who do you want to attract? Thinking of the audience, and how do you want to attract them? You have, I love the cake story, and that Tammy kind of touched up onto. And I think that could be something. It is something probably that defines you, right? So it could be something that's part of your intro. Hey, I am professionally making cakes, or I'm not sure about your story, but mentioning that, and I am a UX designer or experience designer, and I focus on this and this and that, right? And right now I see a lot of text that's really kind of in a very small size, and it's pretty hard to read. And I think it will be cool if you could do something more visual, where a person can actually see what you're doing, right? Rather than have to read it. And then, yeah, thinking of the call to action. So I'm I'm kind of really tending towards the resume. So I'm really tending towards pressing this button rather than the contact button. And then again, what do you want to achieve with a contact? Do you like to work as a freelance designer? Do you want to get hired? Are you like, what's your intention? What do you want to kind of achieve from the person who is looking at your portfolio? I think that can kind of really help you to focus on the user, and what they are expecting from your portfolio can really help you kind of redefine it a little bit and really concentrate on the important things. Another thing that I wanted to mention is that there is a lot of text, and I'm thinking it could be interesting to see how you can create maybe like an infographic out of that, where you can show similar to here, a similar infographic, but really kind of including your actual steps and maybe some problems that you faced in the way. But what I really, really loved is your lessons learned. I think that's a very, very valuable part of your case studies, right? So what's the outcome of the project? What happened? What's changed? How did you change the world basically with this? And another thing that I always recommend to my students is, why not have a call to action at the bottom of your project? So let's say somebody read through this case study and they were like, oh yeah, she's great. She works perfectly. She's perfectly aligned with what we're doing. And once they're kind of read your lessons learned, it could be a call to action button. Hey, let's work together. We can create something together. And so that the person is right away kind of triggered and to getting in touch with you and to connecting with you, maybe potentially working with you. Right. So that could be a good kind of touch point where you can get someone on board a little bit easier. Otherwise, I think you're doing really great. I love the layout that you have. So everything's kind of really well aligned, and it's visually very well pretty well organized. Again, I would maybe use a couple more images here, a couple more infographics. Yeah. But I see that you have very valuable work experience, and that you are focused on something very specific, and it kind of defines you as an experienced designer. And this like research part and this process part that you concentrate on are really your focus. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Should we answer some questions? We've got some questions in the Q&A.
Sure, let's do it.
All right, let's see. All right, everyone. This is from Luz Sandoval. Do you have any suggestions for a designer that has worked primarily in marketing but wants to appeal to agencies? I don't know if anyone has any agency experience.
Yeah. I don't know like how it works now, but back in the day, people would make portfolios and go to agencies and send stuff over to like the creative director or the art director. From my experience now, I've heard a lot of people trash those things, because now I think the most important thing is relationship. And so my suggestion for you would be, like, if you find an agency that's local where you're at, go to the website, find out who the art director is. If you're able to find their email or their Instagram, ask them.
LinkedIn.
Yeah, LinkedIn, ask them for lunch, say, hey, I love what you guys are doing at the agency. And in fact, I think the most important thing, whenever you're reaching out to these type of agencies, always reference the work that they just did, right? Like, hey, my name is blah, 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 blah. I love what you guys do at the agency. I really love this project that you guys did. It was amazing. I love the typography, blah, 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 blah. I just want to get to know you and understand how you guys work and things like that. And if they reply back and are open to coffee, I think that would be amazing, because relationship matters in this field. And in my career, that is what has taken me to where I'm at. Just those small moments of coffee. And then 5 years later, the person remembered my name, And so I don't think like walking to an agency and knocking on the door and saying, here's my portfolio, look at it and hire me. It doesn't work that way. I think you have to kind of almost, in a way, humble yourself and start from the beginning, build that relationship, build that rapport. And I think that will be a way for doors to be open for you when it comes to agency. And I think even in the conversation that you have with them, once you get to know them, they'll probably ask about you. And that way you can kind of tell them about yourself without sounding like you're bragging so that they can hire you. You know, it's a better setting. It's chill. There's no pressure. You're able to tell them about yourself and the experiences that you've had and things like that. You know, I did that with someone. And in fact, when I was talking about myself, it was like, oh, we actually have a position open. I want to bring you over to the company to talk with my boss. And I was able to do that, but I chose to freelance, so I declined it. But a coffee led to me meeting the head of the agency and to talk about potentially working with them. So you just never know.
Yeah, I love that. Erica, do you happen to have any agency experience or any tips?
I do. And I totally agree with Tammy. Like that makes 90% of the work to connect with the right people and just present yourself. Like that's how I got my job in a KQA in Amsterdam. That's what I did. And after 4 days, I was hired. So that's how it goes.
That's amazing.
Just in general, like in terms of, if you're going first time in agency, so that's a great gym. I also know that through that, that pushed me to where I am right now. So I know that for sure. It's just in general, like to present some of the existing skills that you have that could be applicable to agency. So flexibility, a lot of capacity to deal with stress and, work fast, collaborative with others. So this kind of things that maybe you don't have directly experience to design, but maybe you can leverage those things to make your application more successful.
Yeah. Talon, do you have any experience with agencies and what are your tips?
Yeah, I mean, I think, whenever you're switching from one discipline to another, I like the suggestions that Tammy and Erica had. And I think, again, just being thoughtful and deliberate in your goals, right? And then how does your story that you tell with your portfolio help you meet those goals? So if your goal is to get a job in an agency setting, then you have to think to yourself, okay, what is an agency setting? What do they do? What kind of work does that agency do? I was just talking yesterday, I interviewed the creative leadership from Instrument in Portland, and they're an agency, but they're a digital agency, right? So if I was going to go work if I was going to sort of take my experience now and sort of adapt it to their needs, I would really look at the projects that they do and really then assess what I have in my portfolio of work and really see if I can craft a story that really would be attractive to Instrument, that would really match with their goals, as an agency. So if you look hard, if you think deep enough about it, there is a story there that you can tell, even if you feel like you have a really minimal amount of experience, there's still a story that you can tell. And that could be one about, willingness to learn, willingness to change, and willingness to grow, there, as designers, like we can be really creative about the stories that we tell, as long as we know why we're telling them. And then we can go, figure out the best way to then go and execute on them. So, I think anyone who's switching sort of disciplines or careers, like the best thing to do is really think very deeply about your goals and how they map to the jobs that you want to go and apply for, and then craft your story then to meet those goals. So.
Yeah, lots of valuable tips here. Thank you all so much. All right, so we have a couple of questions in the Q&A. By Tanya asking, when documenting the process, what's a good ratio for visual examples to written explanations? Thanks.
I think they go hand by hand. So, you could use some data visualization kind of visuals to actually present some research that you have conducted in a more digestible way. But I think they go hand by hand most of the time. So it's 50-50. Like also, if you put something only visual, is not understandable from somebody. So just a small, a small explanation on the side that explain what exactly is and what do you do with that. So for me, this is like 50-50 really.
I think it's, it's probably one about, I mean, you have to think about the medium of which people will be consuming. And you have to remember that, think about your own self and your own habits. How much do we read online, especially when we're on our phone or on our devices? So whatever you choose that ratio to be, you have to understand it's a very visual medium, design in general. Again, creativity overall, creative sort of professions are usually very visually oriented. And I think I like what Eric was saying, like you need just the right amount of text or writing to give the proper context to the visuals that you're sharing. If the visuals speak for themselves, the text is probably useless at that point. And so it's just, taking up space. But if you do need to give someone insight or context into the visuals that you're sharing and why you're sharing them, then, be as brief as you can and clear as you can. And then you'll end up really with the right ratio. Then you really share it with people, share it with those trusted, colleagues or friends that you have or family members, and really ask them what message they're getting from your portfolio. And when they look at this site, do they understand why this image is here and what it's trying to communicate, and what, well, not just is it good or bad, but really like, what message are you getting from this? I think it's always really helpful. Last time I was working on my portfolio, I was doing this exact thing with a trusted colleague of mine, and really getting him to see it with fresh eyes and really imagine and really ask all those questions that I myself, again, I'm too close to my own work. I don't know if I have the right ratio until I ask someone.
Tammy, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think, like if you write things out and explain the project and you have visuals to follow up with it, I think a good test is like Talon said, like if you are able to if you're able to send the page to a friend who knows nothing about the project you worked on, and then ask them after, like, hey, what was the project about? If they're able to accurately give you accurate answer, then I think you've done your job well. So I think for us, it's important to know that it does go 50-50, but I don't think you need to like write a lot, especially if you have visual examples. But I think you kind of need to give that context, like, hey, this was this work for blah, blah, blah. Well, like, I've seen some people say, here's the problem and here's the solution. And then they have the visuals, right? And that's a good way to like break it down to the simplest form, instead of saying, hey, I was hired by blah, blah, blah to do this. Here's what I made, So, yeah.
I think, Talon, you said something super important, like testing your portfolio. Like you have to run a user test on your portfolio first.
Yeah.
Just give it to,
For
one
real.
of your family members and just see if they understand what is written there. And then, you're good to go. And then you can learn from maybe some things that you can iterate on based on those kind of trials, dry runs that you can do.
Yeah. I think it's important to even have friends that are not in the creative field.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Just so they can like,
that would be so biased. Like, no.
Yeah, it'll be so you will get the honest truth. Because I think as designers, like if I send my stuff to another designer, yeah, they're gonna give me the truth, but like I wanna, like, not everyone that looks at my website is gonna be a designer, right? And so I need to be able to like see it from a perspective of someone who has like not that much interest in creativity or design. And then I'll be able to really get that honest, unbiased answer.
Totally.
Yeah.
Even recruiters actually look at portfolios as first before.
And
they
they're
send
not
it over
designers,
to, right?
Yep.
So, yeah, there you go.
I totally agree with all of that. And to give it just another level, so you can also create that hierarchy, not just by using image and text, but you can also create a hierarchy within the text or within the image, right? So it goes really, it can go really deep, and you can create that hierarchy. What do you want the person to see first? Make that stand out more, right?
Right.
Or what do you want them to read first? That's why when you look at a magazine, like an article, you will be able to see the headline first, then you will see the subheader, just because they're using different character styles that make them more visible. And they're also really short and crisp and easy to digest. So if that person wants to dig deeper, they can go into the body text, which is then a little bit smaller and a little bit more to read. So if the person is curious, they can dig deeper. right? So that's kind of, you kind of like pulling somebody into that information and making them stay as long as possible, right?
Yeah,
So
that's
you
good.
kind of attract somebody with an image, and then you kind of pulling them into the text, into the in-depth information.
That's good. I really like that.
100%.
Cool. All right. Then we have another question by Gabriela. Gabriela is asking, what's a good site to create a portfolio?
Well, I mean, you said at the top, Julia,
Right.
Adobe
Yeah.
Portfolio.
Adobe Portfolio.
Good,
Yeah,
good combo.
so-
Good combo.
Yeah, I have a good combo that I found works for me as a freelancer. I feel like if you are maybe if you're a UI UX designer, it's probably a different case, because you probably also want to show your UI UX skills, and why not design your own portfolio and make that your project, right? So that's something where you can really shine and really show what you can do by showing a portfolio that's custom, that's well designed, that's kind of showing your skill set as a UX UI designer. In my case, I am a branding and packaging designer. So for me to update projects, it has always been kind of like the struggle for me to update projects on my portfolio site. So what I'm using is Behance, which also brings me a lot of clients. And then my Behance projects are attached to my Adobe portfolio, which comes free if you have the CC subscription. You can create, I think, up to 5 sites or something. So you can even create, let's say I'm a branding and packaging designer. Let's say I want to create one separate portfolio for my branding work and one separate portfolio for my packaging work. I can totally do that. And then I can also link them up with my domain, like a custom domain name. So if somebody goes onto masalska.design, they will be able to go to my portfolio site, which is free. So definitely recommend that. It's probably not the most professional way, but it's the easiest way for me. It's really convenient, and it does the job.
Yeah.
What about you guys? Tell me, where do you host your work?
Yeah, so I use something called Cargo Site. I used to use Squarespace, but I left Squarespace for that. In the past, I have used Adobe Portfolio because it was just easy to be able to put my work on Behance and then put it on my website. Whereas right now, I use Cargo. I have to like sit down and think like, okay, which project do I want to put on here? And so, yeah, but I think it's important to find something that is simple and easy for you. I've gone through everything. I went through format. Well, first I went through MySpace, back in the day, that was our thing. And then MySpace, Black Planet, Format, Squarespace, Adobe Portfolio, Cargo. So I've been through everything, but I've learned a lot. I even tried WordPress, and that was just too much. It was too much coding for that.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so we're kind of running out of time, so let's quickly jump through the projects. And there's a question also by Maggie asking about how do you speak to NDA work in your portfolio? And I think that was really well solved, and I see it quite often. So Jenny, for example, has a password protected project, so you can have someone who you potentially want to work with in the future sign an NDA, and then you can share the password to this project with them. So for example, here Jenny in her innovation work has a password protected project. So that's one of the solutions. Is there anything else you guys recommend?
I think it depends on the client. I've had some where I signed the NDA and also I could not share the work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And
so it all depends on your client relationship.
Yeah, it depends on the client relationship. I know there's some companies that I've worked with where they're like, we're hiring you, work for hire. We're going to show this on our platform and everything, but you cannot go out of your way and say, I made that, I did this. So I kind of had to weigh the pros and cons. Like, is it okay if they do that? Is this project like such a big scale that I would like my name to be attached to it? Or is this something that I can just do and be proud of for myself? Because I mean, I don't think I need to show everybody everything I'm working on. But yeah, I think it just depends. So just make sure you read through the NDA and the contract, because sometimes they will say, hey, you can't share this at all.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much. And then another thing we have by Itzel asking, what would you put in the button on the like call to action button instead of contact? Do you all have any ideas on how can you make it, a little bit more interesting, a little bit more exciting, a little bit more target specific?
Well, actually, you could try different stuff and do like some experiments. So maybe like get in touch. I mean, you can try different kind of copies and then see maybe through analytics if you can install that on your website, like how much traction that gets with different kind of UX copy that you have. I don't think again, there are some best practices to that. I mean, contact is probably the most used one. Yeah, but just do some benchmarking and then you see what else is out there and then you try stuff for yourself and experiment and see and learn what works for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say, for example, it's food related. It could be something, let's cook something together, or, like make it fun, make it entertaining, if that's what you want to achieve. Now, if you are more into the research side and you want to appeal super professional and super serious, that's also part of your brand identity. How do you want to present yourself, right? How do you want your potential clients to see you, perceive you, and what kind of audience do you want to attract? And again, like not only what the button says, and maybe the position where it's placed also plays a role, what it could say. For example, here on the main landing page, it could say contact, but by the end of a project, it could say something, let's work together, or let's create something cool together, So it depends, I would say, depends on your audience and what you want to achieve. But yeah, Erica, I think, if you really want to make sure that it works, test it out, do some data, bring some data behind this question. Cool. And then we have one last question by Marcel asking, what are your thoughts on presenting a case study with a downloadable PDF or allowing anything to be downloadable in general?
Talon?
I think that your website should speak for itself. I think the minute you start getting into a PDF, the minute you're just providing too much information, and I really question its value at that moment. I think that, you really want to be as focused and clear as possible in your case studies. And again, if you find yourself needing to like have a whole PDF to describe a project, I'm not sure who's looking at that. I think you can adapt your deliverables for your website, like on demand, as people request. But I wouldn't worry about making a PDF, really. Let the website speak for itself.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think something that you could do eventually. So let's say the portfolio is the first step, right, to go into hiring process. So maybe in a deep dive session, then you can create like a PDF where you expand a little bit more on things that you don't have the intention or either the time to present in your portfolio. So if something is worth mentioning during the process, that some challenges that you had to face, that you learned a lot from it, those kind of things can be presented to like a presentation, so a PDF. But it's more like you walk through the person that interviews you to expand more on what happened in that specific context. But on the website, I would highly discourage. Like, I don't think it's a good best practice.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, I also agree with that. I think it just gives somebody, also people, not only potential clients get on your site, maybe somebody who just wants to steal your work. It just recently happened to me. A girl just took my project and put it into her portfolio, like as it is.
Oh my gosh.
So if you give less chances to people to kind of really, take advantage of your work, you're also on the safe side. We don't want to kind of think about that negatively, but it does happen. So yeah, and I also agree with Tyler. It kind of loses the value once you make it that accessible, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we have another question by Adrienne asking, as a beginner with no experience, where should someone start? How do you find opportunities?
Ooh, I love questions like these.
It's a good one, yeah.
Yeah, I think trying to say this in a way that is helpful. I think sometimes we pay too much attention to the destination versus paying attention to our journey. I've always said this, and it's something that I hold dear to my heart. The journey is the reward, not the destination. So I think a lot of us are like, oh, I want to design for Nike, but it's like the journey is going to be so much more fulfilling. And if you get to that point, you're not going to feel like, oh, I've made it. You're going to feel like, oh, this is part of my journey. What's next? And as a beginner with no experience, my biggest advice to you is to just start. I think sometimes we try to learn before we start. And as we're learning, we get discouraged and we never started, and so, yeah, start somewhere. Exactly. Like if your thing is, okay, I want to get into UI UX or graphic design, or whether it's Photoshop, Illustrator, XD, Premiere, honestly, I encourage you to just open it, play around with it, get familiar with like where some things might be, then go on YouTube and find a tutorial, and then just start from there. Like right now, as far as I am in my career, I am learning Cinema 4D, and Adobe Dimension. And now I'm trying to learn how to mix those two together. And for like 3 years, I was just always scared. I was watching so many videos. I never started. So it was just this year that I finally downloaded it, made my account, and started messing around with it. So my biggest thing is just start. The journey is the reward. Enjoy the journey. Don't ever feel like you have arrived. I think having a student mindset will take you so far. And yeah, like for me, I've learned things from, I was a high school teacher. I learned things from my students. As much as I taught them, they taught me a lot about patience, a lot about experimenting and just trying things. And even if I fail, at least I tried. So that's my advice.
Yeah, I think there are so many opportunities to create, and so many venues and avenues for getting your work out there that, yeah, I think more what you're trying to do is trying to cultivate that sort of designer mindset, that sort of deliberate creator mindset. And I think, one good way, of course, is, following people, like finding people who you want to sort of learn from, or, really trying to break down their own process. And of course, having the experience, like giving yourself jobs to do passion projects, or just being able to find, like, an opportunity, whether through school or through, like a certificate program of some kind, because I think one of the things that stops people from starting is having a full sort of, like, having a picture, an idea of, well, how do you do this? Like, how do you, go about, doing, this thing called design and what it means. I think that's one of the barriers to entry. Like, design can mean a lot of things, and there are a lot of paths in being a designer, a lot of paths you can follow. So yeah, I think it's just really just getting out there and finding those things that excite you, and those avenues of exploration. And yeah, you should be able to find your way.
Yeah, I also totally agree with that. Start somewhere, build out passion projects. Then the next step is, I kind of went through that whole thing myself. So just to break down the steps, first of all, you have to have some resources that you can present to someone, right? So you will have to have some passion projects, or maybe if your parents own a business, make some branding for them. Or if your friend has a business, design their branding, put that into your portfolio, work on some passion projects. Once you have a couple projects in your portfolio that you think represent your skill set, and once you're feeling like you're ready for actually like a client, where you kind of have that responsibility of delivering for money, you can go and so what I started out with, I put on a Google business. So put yourself out there, right? Create your online portfolio that people can find you online. Maybe build out social media. Maybe you want to have an Instagram account where you publish your work, where you connect with potential clients. Do advertisement online. just connect with people who are business owners. Maybe your local coffee shop needs a rebrand. You can share a card with them. Just talk about yourself as a designer, right? Tell everybody what you do, and let everybody know what you can do for them, right? And that spreads the word. So if you want to go local, Google business, and yeah, just word of mouth, and start working with small businesses around you. Then another thing that I also did that was also really great, working with agencies. So I got to work with bigger brands like Panda Express, Jameson Whiskey. I was like, what? I'm sitting in my in my little home studio, and I'm literally retouching a photo for Jameson Whiskey. And so that was that gave me just another level of working in a team. And well, for that, you can reach out to the agencies directly. Maybe you have, someone who works at an agency who can maybe recommend you as an external partner. Another thing that was possible before COVID, you could go to trade shows, you could go bring a stack of maybe sample work, or any kind of business card, anything, any promotional material. You can talk to businesses that you're interested in, maybe a specific industry, a convention going on. You can go around and connect with the different businesses and offer your services. So that's a good starting point. And then once you have that built out and you have this online presence also kind of working for you, you create this routine of putting work into your portfolio. That's usually when I don't have any clients. I put more work into my portfolio and build out my online presence, so I get more clients. And then I get, it's kind of like a wheel that goes that goes on and just grows and grows and grows over time. So yeah, but those are kind of like the steps that I took, and it went pretty well so far. Okay, cool. All right, do we have any other questions? Okay, so that's the start. Tenia, one last question. What are some lesser known deadly sins when it comes to portfolios? That's a good one.
Using too many words, I'll say. I think again, like I pay attention to my own habits and my own sort of attention span. And again, I think not really understanding the medium in which you're communicating in is one of those deadly sins. Again, I think it can trip you up where maybe you weren't expecting it. I think you were, you're especially when you're expecting, like, oh, I'm providing all, everything I have. I'm providing as much information as I can. That's going to make this, this work better. And that's not always the case. That old adage, less is more. When it comes to your visuals, when it comes to the text that you're providing, the content you're providing, I think that's always one that trips people up. So definitely one to always be aware of.
All right. Maybe Tammy and Erica, one tip that you want everybody to take away from this for the deadly sins.
For the deadly sins, yeah. Redundancy. I think, like, figuring out the best way to explain your project in the most concise words. Because I think if you're like saying, I did this project because I love dogs, and then later on within that same sentence, you're like, I love dogs, and that's why I did this project. It's kind of like, it shows that you're still like an amateur. So you just want to pick your wordings well and be careful of repeating yourself.
Yeah, for me it would be around how do you mostly talk about your users. So this is something that I see sometimes, like I could tell already from the way designers express their vision on users, if they're good designers or not, for example. Like saying like, oh yeah, I did some testing and of course it went all well. And I was like, okay, this to me doesn't sound somebody that wants to learn from customers or from users, whatever is your audience. And for me, that is like a no-go. Like that is something that is a red flag for me.
It's good.
All
Cool.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Also, I think another thing is that we kind of touched upon earlier is to really mention your responsibility and to not kind of oversell yourself, and to really kind of mention, credit people, credit others' work. I think that brings you more value than the work you claim to have done. So yeah, that would be my tip.
For sure.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. This was really, really awesome. Hopefully you all could take away something from this. It was really exciting to chat with Talon, Temi, and Erica, and Antonio. Your portfolio was really great to take a look at. I think we have a lot of students and people who are getting a lot of inspiration and insight into the industry from all of us. So thank you all so much for joining. I'm giving it over back to Liz.
Well, thank you all. So have a good one. We did record this event. So San Diego Design Week, we'll go ahead and post that later. But have a really great weekend and good luck on your portfolios. We can't wait to see. Please tag us or share with us later how you did. Hope you're inspired. Have a good one, everyone.
Thanks, Liz.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.
Take care.